Kathryn Jean Elizabeth Gallant is an extraordinary woman. She is the American CEO of a British-based company specializing in market research on global healthcare. She is an accomplished horsewoman, a caring wife to husband Peter, and a devoted guardian to her nephew Sam. However, behind all of Kathryn's accomplishments, there is the story of a woman who has endured an unimaginable series of life tragedies and challenges that would have depleted most. Yet, as you will learn in this week's 64 More interview, Kathryn has always found a way to survive and flourish, despite the overwhelming odds.
I know the minute my childhood ended.
Ended?
Ended. I was 9 years old, so October 1973, about 2 months after we'd moved to Massachusetts, my father killed himself in our home with us there with a handgun. When I first heard the gunshot, I thought my father had killed our dog because he had killed another dog when I was 5. He'd gotten angry at it and shot the dog in our backyard.
So, your father had unusual tendencies to begin with.
Violent tendencies. Yeah. So, he was handy with his hands and a belt.
Handy, not in a good way, you're talking.
Way, right.
Okay.
And he, beat and raped my mother that I heard from the next room. And I got hit a lot. Being thrown, being moved, being grabbed, being hit. And my mother was a big hitter. And she loved hitting, she was a big face hitter. So, just part of my growing up.
But that wasn't the only childhood impact that you had in your life.
6 months later, in April of 1974, so now I'm a month shy of my 10th birthday, I have to go for my 4th grade physical. And for a few years I've been having some aching in my left knee. And I'd mention it to my mother, and she'd say, it's growing pains, which are a thing. That does really happen. The thing about it is growing pains are generally symmetrical. In both legs, both knees. This was in my left knee, but, I was fine. There wasn't any other, I was running and jumping and moving. So I went to my 4th grade physical, and I was sitting on the edge of the exam table. It was this lovely young woman doctor, the first woman doctor I'd ever met. She was looking at my legs and making sure my joints were fine, and she asked me if I had been having any issues. And I said, well, sometimes my left knee hurts. And I was a little above her because I was sitting up on the table, and she was sort of bent over my leg. And she put her, I'll never forget, she put her hand on my, my little kid knee, and I felt her fingers behind my knee. Her face changed, and she, her brows went down, and she scowled, and, she felt a mass in my knee. And she told my mother that she was calling Boston Children's Hospital, which was the children's teaching hospital as part of Harvard Medical School in Boston, and we were to get in the car and drive straight to Boston.
Do you try to talk to your mother about it?
My mother doesn't know what's happening. We don't know anything. The doctor, she just knows I have to be seen. She just knows a mass in a kid's leg is not okay. And the only thing it could really be would be cancer. And the other thing is the doctor knows that in 1974, most kids with cancer die. So we go to Boston. I'm there by the end of the day. This was a Tuesday, I think. On Wednesday morning, they do a biopsy. Diagnosis is it's cancer. It's osteogenic sarcoma, and my leg has to come off. That was the treatment.
There was no
limb salvage yet.
Do they tell you this to your face?
Yes, but I don't understand what the word amputate means. And my mother knows what that means, and I think I know what it means.
What did you think it meant?
I thought it meant they were going to take the tumor, scoop the tumor out. I didn't know.
And did you not have conversation with your mother after the doctor left?
No, because my mother was staying in a hotel somewhere in Boston, and she had gone. I was in early surgery the next day, and she had gone back to sleep to get ready, and the doctor came in to see me late at night to explain what was going to happen. I knew that it would be a surgery. I knew it was a big deal, but I just hadn't really quite understood that the whole leg would be gone.
The whole leg from the hip or from the knee?
From the upper thigh. Because they have to take a margin above where the tumor is, which is sort of still a standard part of cancer surgery. They always take around, they try to get the tissue around the tumor or above the tumor.
So they take the leg off unbeknownst to you. You wake up.
And then I find out the true meaning of the word amputate.
Did you find out because you touched your leg and it wasn't there?
I woke up and I was having phantom pains, which were really, really pronounced at the time. They don't just amputate your leg and send you back to your bed. They put a cast around the stump, and they put attached to this cast this pylon, which is essentially a metal pipe with a foot on the end. Not your foot, not of even a foot your size necessarily, because the goal is to get you up and walking and starting to put pressure and shaping what's called the residual limb, the stump. I had this sensation that my foot was burning and itching, and so my mother moved the sheet, and I saw this, kind of almost adult foot, and she was scratching the foot, and it was alleviating the itching, which phantom pains are a whole other, it's just a fascinating, weird phenomenon. So anyway, I was angry and crying, and my physical therapist showed up, this young woman who I now know is fresh out of her college program. Her name was Jean Waldron, and hi, I'm your physical therapist, and we're going to get up and start walking. And I slugged her.
You did not.
I was, drugged and angry, and there was no way. Things were just moving too fast. And, we waited a while. I did get up that day. By the end of the day, I understood what had happened. And I was like, okay.
Really?
Well, I'd had some recent experience in accepting an end of things. I knew sometimes things ended and changed, and that was that.
Were you a case study for them in any way?
Yes, I'm one of their longest term survivors, so I've been in the research cohort for long-term survivorship since I ended my treatment. There are other weird things about my cancer. So usually the expected pattern was that if the cancer metastasized from a hard tissue, a bone, it metastasized to a soft tissue, most likely in kids, the lungs. But mine metastasized to another bone. So 2 years later, I ended up with another tumor in my right leg.
How was it discovered?
I had been, my treatment was over, my chemo was over, and I'd been released, gone home, and I was on follow-up. And a couple of months after that, I started feeling pain in my right leg.
What did you think? Can you remember?
I knew exactly what it was, and I didn't say a word.
Why not?
I didn't want to do it anymore. I knew what it was. By this time, Jean Waldron had left working at Children's. She was a school-based physical therapist out in western part of Massachusetts, where I lived. So she was my physical therapist. And she became friends with my family. And she was one of my mothers by then. Basically, I just glommed onto her. And she was going to Boston to do some things, and my mother was working. And so I had to go to Boston for a follow-up appointment during the day. And so Jean took me. And we refer to her in our family as Dear. That's her family nickname. So Dear and I went to Boston, and she took me to the hospital for my checkup. And I said something.
To Jean or to the doctor?
No, to the doctor.
Was Jean in the room?
She was in the room. And by 7 o'clock, this is right before Thanksgiving, we have a diagnosis. And I have another really large tumor. They were going to try a limb salvage, a knee replacement.
So this was a new technology?
A new technology. They'd only done it a few times in kids in New York. It hadn't been done in Boston. So my mother came to Boston. We went to Dear's family's house to stay, which was right outside of Boston. By this point, I'm 11. And I come into the house, it's late. It's the night before I get admitted to the hospital. Dear's mother said, do you want anything? And I said, I want a drink. Who says that?
An 11-year-old has seen more life than she should have. How's that?
So she happened to have some cold duck. And she's a very proper Irish Catholic woman from Boston. The bishop had been to dinner and so forth and so on. She didn't bat an eyelash.
Did you like it?
I thought it was the greatest thing. I thought it was so slick. Sitting up late at night in a snowstorm with adults. This is what adults do when the shit hits the fan. Have a drink.
So at the age of 11, you've lost one leg and you've lost the ability to bend the other leg, pretty much.
Basically, yeah. Right after my surgery, they were constantly doing lung x-rays, always. And right after my surgery, they saw a shadow on my lung. So a month or two after I have the knee replacement, I have to have a lung surgery to have what's called a wedge resection. They took that out. And then
Took the cancer out of the lung.
out. They didn't take a lobe or anything, but a part of the lung. And then in the meantime, they found another one on the other side.
Come on.
Yeah.
Were there any indications of why this was happening to you?
We now know from a research perspective that it's so scientifically unsatisfying, but whether you get cancer or not is really basically luck.